It's time to get on your feet. Make some noise for the boys. Give it up for your very own Third Degree. oh God. The podcast.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan, and welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, I'm Peter, and it is the normal trio today. Myself, and of course, starting right here on my left, the great Dan Crook. Hello, Daniel. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. I'm doing very well, thanks. How about yourself?
Well, I'm tickled pink because the Open today was brought to you by Dan's incredible library of impersonations. And if anybody didn't pick up on what that is, please give us the background on that Open.
Yeah, after the North Texas SC championship game, I was in the Hall of Fame club, and Chris Burkambus, the stadium announcer, the guy that shouts a lot, good friend of every sports team in town, mentioned that he always listens to the podcast, and he said, I really just hope you don't have an impression of me. And I was like, we'll see then, won't we?
That sounds like a leading statement if there ever was one, but we're happy to oblige you, Chris, and glad you listened to the pod. By the way, I thought it was a spot-on impersonation, Dan. Congratulations. Did you do that in one take?
It was one take. I didn't want to do it live because I was like, I'm going to screw it up, and then I didn't, and I was like, okay. But then I didn't have to scream into a microphone and hurt your ears, so that's good.
Oh, awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that. And, of course, your hero and mine, now fully independent, Buzz Carrick of thirddegree.net, like the actual website. Come in, Buzzard.
Hi, Peter. Calling in tonight from the Dallas Morning News offices where I just turned in my key and security card.
If we ever were so lucky to get anything like that.
No, we
didn't. People actually believe we have a desk there.
Do they really?
Yeah, I've been asked several times about it.
All right, so for those who have not seen the news on Twitter or wherever else Buzz has posted it, Buzz, I will now give you the floor to make your big announcement on your very own pod.
Sure. Well, the announcement is that we have decided to take Third Degree independent and end our relationship with the Dallas Morning News. We've been there since 2012. It's a good relationship all along. They were really nice and really supportive in the sense that when we needed a server, they gave us a place to be. But there's never been any compensation from their end, and I think we do a really quality product. And with the support of people that like you guys who work with me, and the support of people that support us on Patreon, we're feeling really good about our chances. And we're going to go independent and make our own setup, and we're going to try and build an audience. We're going to try and build this project a little bit, see if we can generate a little bit of income and to cover some of our expenses with Patreon and with some light advertising. But there will be no paywall, because part of the biggest complaints we ever got was, of course, paywall with the Dallas Morning News. No offense to them. They're trying to make a profit over there. So we're going to expose our product to as many people as possible and try and broaden our reach to as many people as possible. And we'll hope you'll enjoy the excellent content, and we hope you'll enjoy this podcast, and we'll hope you enjoy our reporting on Twitter and Facebook and all the other places. And if you would like to support us on Patreon, you can. Or you can just enjoy the content and support us by spreading the love and telling people about what we do. So we're pretty proud of the new setup we're putting together, and we're hoping everyone's going to like it.
Do you mind if I supply some additional background?
Please, go ahead.
So I don't remember what year it was. It was probably 2011 or 2012. The Third Degree site, you had posted it, or you had done a deal with the ESPN Dallas website. Wasn't that right?
ESPN Dallas for 2010 and 2011. We were on ESPN Dallas.
Prior to that, you were a completely independent blog that you just had running like on a WordPress servers or, one of those things. And then ESPN was paying you a small amount of money for your content on that website, correct?
Yes, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Certainly not a living wage, but a little bit.
Right. So, and then, as everybody predicted, that was a goofy idea that ESPN could never support all these independent city sites, and they essentially crushed it and canceled it, and you were without a site. I was working at the Dallas Morning News at the time, who no longer had a regular beat writer for soccer, and you needed a place to put your content. They needed soccer content, and it seemed to make a lot of sense. And so in fact, I think I'm correct in saying this, you were really the only kind of like third-party freelance writer doing this kind of thing for the Morning News at the time. And then as the years went by, the Dallas Morning News, because of all the obvious changes in newspaper circulation and print subscriptions, cratering, they instituted a paywall. And when they did that, it was like we went back to them and said, hey, are you going to plan on giving us any kind of compensation? We appreciate the fact that we got the cachet of being tied to a major metropolitan daily and the fact that you were paying for all the hosting. But at this point, maybe it's time for you to compensate Buzz and whoever else for the writing we do. And they went, we're not really set up or budgeted to do that. But they did offer one small thing. They were like, hey, let's do this. If we set up this deal where if somebody buys a subscription to the paper and they relate it to you, we'll give you a spiff on it, right? I don't remember. Am I describing it right?
Yeah, you had to do it through one of our pages and then it would work, yeah.
And as we all could easily predict, we never saw a penny out of the deal, right? So I think for a long time we've all wondered what was each side getting out of this and who was getting more out of it than the other. And I think you said this very nicely. There is no ill will or hard feelings between you or me or the Dallas Morning News. That is a great institution. They're just not modeled to do this type of business with people like you. And at this point, it made more sense for you to go do your own thing and try to raise your own funds versus just whatever you felt like you were getting in return from the Morning News.
Yeah, they've been great partners. They've never really meddled editorially at all. So, we had that support of their server and their photo archives and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been great when we needed a server, but server costs have come down considerably. So we don't need them for that anymore. So at this point, it was a relationship that was built that was getting, I felt like it was getting more for them than it was for us because we were providing great content and we're only getting a little bit in return once the paywall happened. So when I called them yesterday to let them know, Wednesday, they were very amicable. Everything was fine. We've left on good terms. Every once in a while, they actually use one of our guys as a freelancer when John Arnold is gone. So maybe that'll continue. So everything's positive. It's just we're betting on ourselves. We're going to take a shot at ourselves and see if we can make this thing move a little bit.
All right, so we are recording this on Thursday evening. The new website, thirddegree.net, which is the number 3 RD degree.net, will go live when?
Tonight. It's the same URL we've had since 1997. That we promised the Morning News we would stay with them through the end of October. So that's midnight. So late tonight, we'll change it over. And Friday, November 1st, all the content will be on the new site. Hopefully, given my technical limitations, I'll get it all done tonight with Dan. He'll help me a little bit, hopefully, and we'll get it done right around midnight, hopefully.
Dan's a total nerd, right, Dan?
Well, yeah. You missed all the fun we were having today trying to get the last couple of little wrinkles out.
Well, I haven't even looked at it recently, so I'm super excited to see what it turns out to be like. So just to be clear, there is no paywall in the sense that you have to pay to get the content. All of the content will be free, correct?
Yes, the only thing that is not going to be on there is some stuff that we were doing extra for our patrons who support us on Patreon. But that has always been the case since we've had a Patreon. For now, as we try this out, we're trying to build audience, so everything's going to be free that's on the thirddegree.net website.
And I will say independently, what Buzz has done is set up this Patreon account so that if you are consuming his content, please understand this dude essentially is doing the soccer lord's work in covering soccer in this in our community in a very unique and special way, and he's doing it out of his own pocket. So if you enjoy his work and his coverage and you read it on the regular, he's not asking you for a specific amount. You could go in there and throw in $1. You could go and throw in $10 a month, whatever you feel comfortable with. So I would encourage you to do that if you are consuming his content, and I would appreciate it for Buzz. So there.
I think it's worth saying as well, Buzz doesn't live on Frisco Square and just walk over the road. He has a considerable drive to there and back to the stadium for practices, for games, everything else. There's a good expenditure that he's taken out to cover the team.
Yeah, Buzz lives all the way out in Arlington, drives all the way to Frisco several times a week to go cover the team, attend practice, interview players, go to the games. Your dedication, Buzz, to this is beyond honorable, and it's unfortunate that the media industry and the kind of like unfortunate micro interest overall in this particular club in this marketplace has created a situation where like trying to get a full-time job covering soccer in this town just isn't a real thing. It isn't a real thing for anybody in this market for the most part.
Yeah, one reason that we've survived for 22 years is that it never has been a business. It's always been a side thing, a hobby. I'm now trying to take a little bit of a next step. My livelihood is not dependent on this, but I would, as you say, it's an hour each way and it's $7 tolls each way, and that's doing it the cheapest way I could find. So, little things like that up. The Tucson trips add up. The hosting of this podcast, the hosting of the website, it all adds up. I'd like to be able to recoup some of that, and then if we could even, I work in a freelance business, and maybe the business isn't always great all the time, and so if I can build this into something that can supplement my income the tiniest little bit, and then I can start to trickle it down to other guys that work for me, that would be fantastic. We all have big dreams. My Patreon's got goals on it that if we hit, we can make some changes and that kind of thing. But for now, if you like what we do, want to support us, we would love to have your support. And hopefully you will feel like you're getting content with it's worth your money, because if you do support, we give you a little extra special stuff on the Patreon for the people that do support us that way.
So many autographs.
Just autographs. I think that's a great idea. Autograph
from Buzz. No one else.
Hand-drawn pictures of Buzz with his autograph on it. I think that's a great idea. All right, so enough about that. ThirdDegree.net goes live and independent as of November 1st. Congratulations, Buzz. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so let's move on to the stuff everybody really cares about. Just real quickly, MLS Cup 2019 takes place in a little over a week, and I don't think it's the setup either one of us or the lineup of teams that anybody on the pod would have anticipated, although if we'd really thought about it long and hard enough, it's kind of exactly what we deserve, isn't it?
Well, I would like to point out that the last pod I did predict Toronto would get to the final.
Oh, you did? That's right. I forgot about that.
I predicted a win in New York and a win in versus Atlanta or whoever else they got next. So, but I don't think anybody saw Seattle beating LAFC, so I can't take credit on that one.
Yes, it's going to be such an exciting, thrilling final. Hopefully there's more than one shot on target this time. Be great.
It's funny. I think the great irony of the 2019 MLS playoffs is everybody was so excited about the single game elimination setup and how much more added excitement and drama it added to the playoffs versus the home and away deal. But then we got to the semifinal and both favorites or higher seeds lost. And now the two teams everybody really wanted to see in the MLS Cup are no longer in the MLS Cup. And there's all this drama about what it means in terms of LAFC being the greatest team ever and whatever, and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it does accentuate why I'm so frustrated by the way the Supporter Shield is structured because of its unbalanced schedule. Because as a sport, soccer is a weird fit for a single game elimination knockout type tournament, right? Just because it's too easy for a team to sit back and defend, like both these teams did to kind of overcome their nemesis.
Yeah, it's certainly the one game has made it more chaotic, and it makes it harder to defend your home field advantage, perhaps, but then it also makes that home field advantage stronger because you don't have the two legs. Certainly, excitement and chaos has been fun, but I agree with you that it does accentuate the idea that the fact there's not a balanced Supporter Shield schedule, and it is this sort of hyper knockout sort of situation. It's not conducive for the traditional sort of way, but I think sort of the ratings and the hype of some of these games has been something that MLS is going to point at and think, oh, that's what we want. So I think we're going to get more of it, not less, as we go forward.
So, Dan, coming, I don't even know how long you've been in the United States, Dan, but I do wonder, when you first were introduced to the concept of playoffs at the end to determine a season champion, as a foreigner, did you find that really odd or interesting or compelling, or were you completely put off by it?
I mean, I was aware of MLS playoffs before I moved here, but we have them in rugby in England. It's just single, 4 teams, single game semi-finals, single game final.
Really?
We have, promotion playoffs. The Football League do 2 legs, but for the most part, through the leagues, it's 1 leg. It's, it's very normal. It's very normal. I mean, obviously, it sucks that because MLS don't own the Shield itself, and the market in dollars that can, the income that can come from that, they unbalance the schedule and kind of devalue it. But because it would be nice to see the best team over the course of the year recognized as the best team. For which I think we can safely say LAFC have been the best team. They just got it wrong in one game, maybe got a couple of calls that didn't necessarily go their way, and Carlos Vela disappeared in a big game again. I don't know why Bob Bradley got so upset last week.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to watch. It was very much hashtag 2019 in that it seems like MLS made some corrections to the playoff format that everybody enjoyed until they didn't, and then everybody just complained about the new format because it didn't end up.
The format's great. Yeah. Nobody wanted the same final three times in 4 years because it was a dog awful final, but I think that the playoffs have been fantastic. I would have loved to have seen that single elimination style when Oscar Pereira was coach, because that whole getting ready, that anticipating a second leg, screwed his mind up so much that he always did the dumbest crap in the first leg, like playing a 5-man back line in Seattle.
Yeah. You're right about that. But here's what we're looking forward to is a completely sold out NFL capacity 72,000 attendance at CenturyLink for an MLS Cup, and that is going to be insane.
Cold.
And cold. Yes, it'll be cold and rainy, but it will be insane to watch. And so, all right, so that is MLS Cup happening in, 9 or 10 days. It will be in Seattle, though. I guess that's like their 3rd MLS Cup in 4 years, and I'm sure somebody's going to remind me how awesome Seattle is as a soccer town. It's real
they've only had one in Seattle before, and that wasn't even one they played in. So, beats going back to Toronto for the 3rd time in 4 years.
Oh, God, that was the coldest night of my life, 2010, in so many ways. All right, so Buzz, it seems to be that time of year. We now know what, at least in terms of contracts and pickups and booted out the door situations for FC Dallas leading into 2020. So now's the time to kind of start looking forward and figuring out, what the plans are. So let's start off with the 3 guys that they swiftly kicked out the door: Christian Coleman, Edwin Jozy, and Moises Hernandez. And I would say thanks to one, too bad to one, and good riddance to the 3rd.
Yeah.
And not in that order.
Not in that order. Well, Christian Coleman, I think we all could have predicted a year ago this was going to happen, despite, they kept him around because he blew his knee out and he had to rehab, and you can't cut a rehab player. So, great dude. I think if you asked Lucci, that everyone would feel bad, but writing's been on the wall for that guy. Jozy, once he quit in Orlando, quote unquote injured, but quit, as far as we're all concerned, the writing was on the wall there too. Just didn't have the guts and toughness for the Heat here, I guess. Certainly never showed anything in training. Too often when negative things would happen, he would just drop his head and quit in training. So it's like, that's not the kind of mentality Lucci likes. Moises Hernandez, a guy that's been a good servant of this club, but basically the last 2 years he's been on loan to San Antonio. I mean, that was a given that he was going to be out. He's too mistake prone, too likely to get a big card. Just not someone you can rely on in the long term when you've got young guys coming through. That was going to be a no-brainer. And then the last guy was out of contract is Eric Alexander. He wasn't really released per se or declined, but he came here as almost like a player coach kind of scenario to try and bring up the level of training and provide some leadership for some of the young guys. It was a foregone conclusion. I thought that he wasn't going to be around past this year either.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric Alexander was really just a body in training. Moises, kind of like Coleman, you could say the writing was on the wall from the moment that I think he put on Twitter or Instagram that him and his wife, I can't remember if they rented or bought a house, but they made the entire move down to San Antonio. That's not something you do for just a couple of months.
Buzz, was there ever any conversation between you and Lucci or anybody else at the club where anybody kind of capitulated and said, yeah, we totally blew it on Gyasi, and gave any kind of indication of how they managed to get that so wrong, considering how important it is that they get this so right moving into 2020?
I don't think anyone ever explained to me how they got it wrong. I certainly think that they realized pretty quickly, particularly after Orlando, that that was such a bad moment, such a moment where, collectively the coaches, 2 days later he was back in training and the eyebrows were raised. You could see it in their faces, like, what is going on? And that was he got one more sub appearance after that, and that was pretty much it. I mean, I think, they knew at that point it was, and we talked about on this podcast many times that he would never play again. And as for why it went wrong, I think my gut feeling is that they got him on a budget because it was a loan. They just borrowed him sort of. It didn't have to pay full price, and so they were willing to try it, hoping that he had worked out. But I don't know who scouted him specifically. I can't answer that question. They're not usually really open about who, because they don't want, exactly what they don't want is somebody to point fingers at a specific person. But you have to hope that they get a better scouting system because the last couple of guys they brought in have been a little hit or miss. They haven't all hit, certainly. And, they're going to bring in some guys this window, so they better get better about what they're doing or there are going to be some problems.
Well, the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway out of the declined contract options, is the amount of money it frees up. Because between Christian Coleman and Edwin Gyasi, those were two, I think I'm saying this right, two of the top 5 salaries on the roster that they've suddenly, saved themselves. So that, that's significant, and it'll be interesting to see if or how that gets used for next season.
Well, that it is true that they were both a lot. Gyasi was 570 base and Coleman was 500 base. So, that's $1 million between the two players for a team that's already in the bottom of the thing. Both of those are right around what would be the DP line. So they may have had to buy them down a little bit too. So that frees up a little TAM as well. But that's going to be the big question, isn't it? I mean, this club has talked about this youth movement, but yet both Dan and Lucci have talked about it's not there where it's 100% yet. You still have to be smart with your buys. And we all know you're not going to get your $7 million Rui Diaz. We know. But, if they expect to actually challenge and make progress, they're going to have to hit on a couple of signings. Because if they miss, then you're going to have the exact same team you have now. And it's going to be really hard to project yourself into the playoffs again, because every year, everybody gets better. That's how it works. So if you don't progress, you're going to be out of the picture next year.
So I don't know if anybody else has read it or had a chance to read it over at The Athletic. Sam Sketchall, or however pronounce his last name, wrote a really timely article about how, Major League Soccer, which has always been known for its high level of parity, that's shrinking, how much it's shrunk, and how the top 4 teams clearly are the teams that are spending big dollars on signings, and then kind of defines all of that. And he kind of closes it very clearly saying, look, the days of the FC Dallases and the New Englands and the Kansas Cities and all these other teams that are kind of either mid-tier or lower-tier spenders finding their way to MLS Cup are really starting to become over. And and there is beginning to be a have and have not situation in the league.
Yeah, if you look at Steve Finn's wage graphic that he does, TFC is first, LA Galaxy second, weirdly Chicago third, but LAFC is fourth, Seattle fifth, Atlanta seventh. These teams are spending the money, are going deep in the playoffs. Lucci and I even had a conversation today about special players, about guys that stepped up and scored big goals like Morris, like Rui Diaz. They know that if you want to compete for a championship, you've got to have those guys. Now, we all think down the line, a Paxton or a Jesus could be that guy, but at 19-20, that's a big ask. So, there definitely is some thinking going on in FC Dallas that if they want to try and do something in the next short window, that they got to hit on some guys and get some guys in here that are difference makers. The problem is that we all know Hunt's not spending $7 million on Rui Diaz. So this is going to be an interesting line to walk to see what they can put together, because if you don't have both components, it's going to be really hard to keep up. Both the homegrown youth and the veteran guys have to hit, or you're not going to be in the mix.
It comes back to what you said before. They need to get the scouting on point. You can bring in good value, veteran guys. You can bring in a Ziegler and a Grasso type, but you've got to go out and find the guys who are, good enough, but at the same time cost effective.
So, of the contracts that were picked up, there was several that are, obvious and that are largely just supporting staff. Kyle Zobek, Brian Reynolds, Callum Montgomery, Jimmy Maurer, and even picking up Matt Hedges' option totally makes sense. But then you start to get into another group of 5 or 6 guys that I think deserve larger conversations. First off is Reggie Cannon, Jesus Ferreira, and Ja'Cory Hayes, which are all essentially working off their rookie and or homegrown deals. And what I'm fascinated by is, Buzz, are you at all surprised that Jesus and specifically Reggie, who is now getting regular call-ups to the national team, are being kind of stiff-armed on getting new deals, or do you anticipate both or one of those guys will get a new deal before the new season starts?
Well, they certainly weren't going to let them walk away for free. So what I can tell you for sure is that I know that Jesus Ferreira is negotiating with FC Dallas. They would like to give him a Paxton-ish kind of contract. I think my gut instinct is that the time frame will be shorter. Jesus being Colombia eligible, passport wise, I feel like he'll be a little more mercenary in his mindset. So it won't be quite the same as Paxton. He might want just more of a 3 than a 4 or 5 or whatever. But I think that'll get done because he was one of the key guys they talked about in rewarding kids coming through. Reggie, on the other hand, according to my sources, has turned down at least 2 offers from FC Dallas, and doesn't seem super interested in extending. When you see his body language, walking around on the field, walking around in training, when he comes back from the national team, sometimes he's a little grumpy that he's back. I think. I've not asked him because I don't know what he would tell me anyway, because I don't necessarily have an amazing relationship with Reggie, not negative by any means, but we're not chummy or anything. I think he's probably in that window of, okay, in his head, okay, it's time for me to take a step. I'm in the pool, I'm cemented myself in the national team. Whatever my next tournament is, if I have a good showing, let's see if an offer comes in this winter or this summer. And then I think it's time. And I actually think FC Dallas will be okay with that because they're starting to get a slight logjam at right back. Reynolds needs to play somewhere. If it's not FC Dallas, he needs to go on loan. They got Kevin Bonilla coming through the system. They've got Johnny Nelson who can play on the right too. They've got Brisson who can they use there if they have to, although I don't like that.
Tomasi as well.
Emma Tuamasi, who they have under contract, is a guy that Lucci specifically has said they like him at right back if he'll embrace it. So I think there's a mutual feeling developing, a vibe developing that the timeline is running, the clock's running on Reggie taking the next step. Now, do I know for sure? No, but we've been doing this a long time, and just like we knew, we could tell Mauro Diaz was getting close, just like we could tell Carlos Grezza was getting close.
Right.
This is just what I feel like with Reggie, and I know for a fact he's turning down offers, and that's not a good sign in terms of his wanting to. So he was willing to to play on this rookie option and keep going. Reggie is, so they do have him for 2 years if nothing happens. But he doesn't want to extend apparently. So.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Dan.
I was going to say, well, let's also consider, as long as Reggie's been a professional, he's done interviews where he said, I want to be the best. I do want to go to Europe when the time's right. And, getting in the national team, like you said, going around guys like Michael Bradley, who he's brought up a bunch of times, someone who's played most of his career in Europe, that you start talking to players who've been there and, so, so what was Italy like? What was Holland like? What was, and then you start thinking, yeah, that's where I want to be. That's my next move. So, it kind of makes sense. We obviously, there's the talk about American players getting more expensive or needing to be more expensive, whereas the US has always been a cheap outlet for decent players to Europe. A guy who's out of contract, particularly someone who's under 24 and doesn't have the restrictions that European players out of contract under the age of 24 have, where you have to give them not only a training fee, but you have to give them a full transfer fee. That's an attractive prospect.
It's an interesting calculation because there's several puzzle pieces at play here, which is for Dan and Clark Hunt. Now, Reggie is maybe not the best example of this because what you said, Buzz, that they've got some supporting staff behind him that may be able to fill in his role, and Brian Reynolds coming in and taking his place, maybe 80% of Reggie Cannon. I don't know. I'll let you put the percentage on that. But it does become an interesting equation for Dan and Clark in the idea that is the reason why Reggie is unhappy because Dan and Clark aren't offering him is it an amount of money, or is he just ready to go somewhere else and no matter how much money they throw in front of him, he's leaving?
Well, first, as to Brian Reynolds, it'll be just like Reggie 2 years ago. There'll be some rookie growing pains. Absolutely right this minute. Excuse me a second. Right this minute, he's not going to be Reggie. We all know that. He'll have to grow into it. So would Emma Tuamasi. So would any other solution they're going to come up with. They're not going to buy somebody to play that spot. When the second part of that answer is, I don't think it's the money. I think it's the eyeballs on Europe. I think Reggie has always said that he wants to go there, as Dan mentioned. And the vibe I get and the stuff I get that I hear. And when I say I hear stuff, I don't mean like my barber told me. I mean like I'm hearing it from people that are connected. So it's nothing I can concretely report. I feel like he's put himself deep enough into the national team that he says, okay, for me to progress with the national team, I now need to take my game to the next level. Can I do that here, or do I need to go? And I think the eyes are on the prize, and he feels it's time to go. So. Again, we're just reading the tea leaves on this one, but I feel pretty confident that Reggie thinks it's time, and you can tell the difference between a guy that thinks it's time and a guy that's still content to be here.
Okay, so my question to you, Buzz, is does the club have a backup option ready enough that if somebody from Europe came and said, we'd like to buy Reggie Cannon from you for the right price, they'd be ready to pull the trigger? Or is this a function that they need him to last through the 2020 season?
No, they'd pull the trigger. Yeah, they'd be ready. Because you can either go with Brian Reynolds and have a little growing pain, or you can just roll with Brisson to start out the season.
No, God, please not that. We already saw what that means in Seattle. That would be a terrible, terrible option.
No, I think the answer would be Brian Reynolds, because just like it was with Reggie 2 years ago,
right.
The first game was painful, but at some point you got to play through that, right, and get through that. And Reynolds is a position where he's too good for North Texas now, so he either needs to play somewhere else or he needs to start here, one of the other. It's time in terms of like developing that product, because he's a guy with tremendous upside too. So one or the other of them needs to play somewhere else. And so if you can get a price for Reggie and sell him now, great. or maybe you loan Reynolds at the start of the season and you sell Cannon in the summer maybe. So, and then Brian comes back more ready because he's played in the championship or something. So, all these things are in flux and they're all part of the equation, but this is just my read on Reggie, is that I feel like he's in his head, he thinks it's time to go. And the club definitely has lined up 3 or 4 deep options at right back. To make changes as opposed to like center back where they are not these options.
Right. And to be fair, Dan and Clark Hunt have never, ever stood in anybody's way that wanted to leave, whether it was for the good of the club or not. They've always been willing to let people go. So, all right. So the one name out of all of this that probably caught the most eye rolls and raised eyebrows was the club's decision to pick up the contract of Dominic Badji. Buzz, were you surprised by that?
No, not remotely, actually. And I'm sure Dan would agree with me that when you look at Badji's contract, which is right around $200,000, I'm sure there's a little small bump for his option. But we've talked about this before. If you think he's your number 1 9 option, then he's a failure. He's not scoring 30 goals. He's not Joseph's. But he costs $200,000 and not $1 million. So like he's a valuable MLS veteran that when he plays 30 games, he can score you like 6 or 7 goals. He's a second or third bench player. I'm not at all surprised they picked him up because exactly what he is and exactly what his price is. And he's a pretty hard worker, although he does get banged up a little bit. But here's my big take on Badji. I think they should trade him because I think he's a terrible fit for Lucci ball, Dominic Badji, stylistically. He doesn't fit I don't think he fits what Lucci wants to do. So, there are teams that are worse than Dallas, and there's teams that would like a veteran kind of winger / striker. So I think that's the kind of asset that you can turn, like a little Tesho Ekendelli. You can turn for a little bit of Tam Gam. You can try and build the team more in the direction you'd like. We've talked about the idea that they want to bring in both a 9 and a winger, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But those are positions Badji plays. So I think it's time to trade Badji and see if you can get a little bit for him. And you don't let a player that's, even if it's a small asset, you just don't let them walk away for nothing. You pick them up, try and see if you can do something with them, and you don't give things away for free.
Yeah, like you say, he's a cheap player that plays 2 expensive positions. That's worth its weight in gold. We know the trade market's going to be pretty lively. Cincinnati need to rebuild. Vancouver need to rebuild. You've got Miami coming in and Nashville. So in the expansion draft, they may just pick up some trade bait that Dallas want to deal. It's going to be pretty interesting to see what they do. Miami also, they're pretty big on the youth system they're building up and the money they're spending. They may not want to bother with the super draft, so they may start dealing picks out. So to get a bench player for a reasonable pick that can get you another decent prospect on the wing or up front is something that FC Dallas could definitely do with.
So the rest of the list are people that were under contract and remained under contract, but there were a couple of names in here that raised questions about are they good fits? Are there possibilities they may be moved on anyway? What Buzz or Dan, whoever has the answer to this, what is the status, or is there a plan about Pablo Aranguiz? I had totally forgot about him and that he wasn't sold back to a club in Chile. He was loaned back, and he's still an FC Dallas player. Is there any scenario in which he returns, A, and if not, B, is there a club that's going to buy him and get him off the books?
I'll go after that. I would say there's a less than 5% chance he returns. Like anybody else, this club, when he asks to go home, when he asks to leave, they accommodate you for that. And in a sense, asking to go home, it's not the same as quitting. I don't want to be that strong in my language, but, Lucci's looking for guys he can trust, guys he can rely on. And if you say, I need out of here, then you're not one of those guys. But again, you don't just let a guy walk away for nothing. So like they have him for this year, and I think they even have him for next year if they want him. But I would be stunned if he comes back and they don't work out some sort of scenario where he's on a loan again or gets sold, as long as you're not bleeding money on that deal, you hope that he is comfortable at home and develops at home and gets his game back, and then you can move him and actually recover some of what you spent to get him and actually get some sort of progress. But I don't think he'll be back. You just, again, you don't give away assets, and you try and build that asset. Even if it's not here, you hope it's going to get built back where he's playing.
Has anybody paid attention to how things have gone for him back in Chile since he went home?
Nope.
I noticed he's been starting a fair amount, but I had not seen him getting goals or assists. So it's the same Pablo.
We're not reading headlines, is what you're saying.
No, just what he had. He occasionally tweeted out or Instagrammed out like himself in the lineup, or when he did get a goal or assist, which was once or twice, I think he did something. Somebody was tweeting out, oh, Pablo assist, Baba. So there was a little bit of stuff, but nothing that makes me like, oh, dang it, we got to bring him back. None of that.
The other name.
So that assist, that's still the only assist or goal he's had.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he's getting 90 minutes. That's nice. He's still picking up a lot of bookings. He's Pablo, but one of the big things for him is, there's fans in Chile want him, clubs in Chile want him. They can't afford him. They can't afford the wages he bumped up to with FC Dallas, and they can't afford to pay FC Dallas for him.
That's his problem, not our problem. The other name on the under contract list that is probably one of the largest sources of frustration I have as a fan. What is this club going to do with Santiago Mosquera?
Oof. I think he's a guy that will be in the mix. He has not demonstrated enough that this is my guy. He's gonna be in the rotation probably. You see a lot of time off the bench unless he can come up with something. He's approaching the prime of his career. I think he's 24 now, maybe 25. So, he's not going to develop much more than another season or two. So, he needs to focus a little bit, dial down a little bit, and get. It's hard to really say what's the missing piece is, other than just sort of it doesn't all come together. And as the contracts escalate in this league, the one he's on is not horrible. So it's not as friendly as Don Badji's is, but I've certainly seen worse. He's already under contract, so there was no option to pick up. So they were kind of stuck with him. So
yeah, but I can't believe I'm saying this, but I could make an argument that you're getting a better return on investment on Badji than you are for. I think he's making almost twice as much money as Badji than you are in Mosquera.
Yeah, he is, and that's why that contract is a little bit more and the production is a little bit less. So he would be hard to move. And like I said, it's not an option. So he was under contract, so you don't really have much choice.
Right.
You hope you can, listen, in the spring, he looked lights out. I thought he was going to be MVP of the team because he was killing it. It didn't translate into the season. He gets banged up a little bit. He's not, he doesn't stay the course like some other guys, so there's some talent there. You hope it matures. You hope you get something out of it, but you can't count on it yet, which is again why we think there's going to be some movement up front.
Well, they also need to just try and get some consistency out of him. On his day, you can put him up against most of that team and say, okay, yeah, if Mosquera's at his best and Badji's at his best, Mosquera's 2 or 3 times the player. But his best doesn't come around very often. It's it's so hit and miss. He'll have a fair game, then an awful game, then a great game, and then decide he's sick or he's got to go to hospital because he twisted his knee funny, or it's just But if he can be that player, then he's worth something, and if he's worth something, he's not terribly expensive, then it's worth keeping him around and seeing if you can at least try and get the best out of him.
So as I look at the rest of the roster, what really is just blatantly obvious to me is the conflicting ideas of how is Lucci going to get the Thomas Roberts, Dante Seeley's, Edwin Cerrillos, Johnny Nelsons of the world, and also at the same time accomplish this this desire to get better inbound players in at the same time and make all those pieces fit. Buzz, do you have any sense that between Lucci and I always forget his name, the new technical director, the guy that's doing all the scouting and buying and selling of players, what's his name?
Andre Zanata.
Oh, Zanata. Thank you. God, that's sorry. My apologies to him. I don't know why I can't remember his name. All of those pieces and improving that component of it. Do you have any sense that they have a clear path and plan in place going into 2020?
Yeah, I do. One of the things that's I think there's a difference in the young guys between the kids that have cemented themselves and proven themselves to be reliable and are in the mix, and the kids that are still the developmental signing, the Sealy, the Pepe, Thomas Roberts, and as long as they have North Texas to occasionally play those guys with, they're not super panicked about progressing them. Some of it will come down to those guys. When you get your 5 to 10 games, like Thomas has, if you take advantage on some level, then you're going to get more. Like there was some availability at left wing, and Roberts got a little bit of time, and if he'd have really torn it up, he would have kept that spot. But Dante Sealy is so young, and Pepe is still so young. Those guys, you can't expect to become starters anytime soon. They're just going to cherry pick some minutes here or there and play with North Texas. So that having that team to move people up and down for, so they can train every day with your first team and yet still get a full game on the weekend, that's going to be big for those guys. It wouldn't shock me to see some people in that category in the next season or two move, because there has to be a balance with this club of developing assets and then moving them on. You can't keep all of them, because there's more academy guys coming, there's more draft picks coming, there's guys coming in. Eventually somebody has to be sold, like Chris Richards was. So, we've long felt Thomas Roberts might go somewhere, and Dante Sealy goes and trains with people all the time with that TNT passport of his. So there's always a balance there, and North Texas helps. And it's up to the kid in the end. Like, once you get that minutes, you better do something, or else it's a tough business, man. You don't get to play because it's your turn because your mom brought the orange slices.
That was the weirdest. That was awesome and weird all at the same time. So the obvious question, I think what I would like to do is see if we all have a shared agreement of what the biggest needs positionally for this team are. But before we get there, the one other player that I want to ask about is, are we 100% sure that Lucci and Zanata and everybody else involved are feeling that Brian Acosta is a lock for this team next season?
Did anyone hit that one?
Oh, wow, no.
No.
I mean, a lock in terms of being here for the duration of the season.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. He's growing into the roles, particularly playing that deeper 6 role. Did you mean in a different regard?
Well, what I mean is that, based on his performance this year, and to be fair to Acosta, he was asked to play 2, slightly different iterations of the same position. But they've paid a lot of money to get him, and he came with a pretty high pedigree. And I'm not 100% sure there's anybody in the fan base that is super happy with his performance this season. And I'm just wondering, when you've got all these other parts, the Edwin Cerrillos and the Thomas Roberts and the Paxton Pomacalls, and now that Jesus Ferreira is now in that mix, in that kind of area of the field, with all the other things going on, I just wonder if anybody feels, are we all in agreement that no matter what, Brian Acosta is a starting center midfielder for this team next season?
He's definitely the first name in the bunch at the 6, and that's going to be something that should last the season. Hopefully that consistency will in the position will sit well with him, and hopefully he'll stop shooting crappy shots from 3 miles away.
One thing I've talked with Lucci a little bit about lately is the idea of more competition at every position. He has an awareness that some guys became a little entrenched because he didn't quite feel he had the right options, and that's what we've been talking about for a while now, about how this winter Lucci was going to take the roster more in the direction that he likes. He has 4 open roster spots basically right now. And some of the next section, we'll talk about what positions that might be. Part of that will be that there might be more players that are starter quality than there are numbers of positions. And you have to get into things like rotations, and you have to get into things like real competition. And if you have a bad game, the other dude's coming in. There's some of the guys we really like. They're going to be involved in situations like that. When you look at Jesus and Paxton, for an example, so I think Acosta will for sure be on the team. I think he will be one of the 4 or 5 guys that are fighting for 3 spots in the center of midfield.
All right. Well, so let's move on to that next part, which is, do we have an agreement that this team has 2 obvious, most screaming needs? One being the number 9 position, and the other being left wing, or whatever you want to call that position, which has been this weird black hole of nothingness for a couple of seasons now, or ever since Castillo left the team. Are those the 2 most obvious needs, and what would be other ones from anybody else between the 2 of you?
Yeah, 100%. Those are the 2. Yeah.
And your dog, Dan, and Dan's dog. So all 3 of you, Buzz, Dan, and the dog, all agree the number 9 and the wing. All right.
Well, as we say, Cobra Ondresic will be part of the answer. But it was an 8-game stretch, and you never put all your eggs in one basket. You can't just rely on him. You need a 9 that stretches the field, because he's not a stretch the field, so you need a more of a stretch the field kind of 9. You want challenge. You want some talent in there. You want to try and take things to the next level. So he's part of the question, part of the puzzle, but not the 100% answer. Left wing, same deal. Santi, Paxton, Thomas Roberts has played over there. Dante Seeley can probably play over there. A lot of guys that could be in the mix.
Jesus Ferreira.
Jesus Ferreira, yeah. Baji, if he's still here, I want to trade him. None of those guys so far are the answer. So, again, if you're trying to progress this team and you're trying to make a challenge, you're going to bring in some talent at that spot. And if you can't beat out whoever they bring in, then that's the business, right? Well, then I'll give you the other 2 positions that I think are interesting, that I think they need to do something at.
Well, hold on. Before you do that, let me ask, when we talk about the 9, how many legitimately, Buzz, I'm going to ask you to do this and pull this out of your butt this early, way before the season. How many games do you think, or how many minutes do you think Ricardo Pepi will get for FC Dallas next season?
I think he'll start the cup games, and I think he will come off the bench in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 games, come off the bench and get some late game minutes. When some certain kind of call-ups maybe happen for one player or another, maybe that he might get a start or 2. And then he'll also go down and start a lot of games with North Texas and back and forth. When you're talking about a 17-year-old kid, as much as I love his upside, I don't think that next year is the year he becomes a starter. He'll be like the end of this year, where you're going to see him come in the end.
Okay, so my very clear question is, do you think the front office has a plan to go out and buy a number 9 for the 2020 season?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, no question.
Define plan, like a plan that's likely to come to fruition, or a shot in the dark that ricochets off of 50 things and ends up being some dodgy left winger,
AKA Cobra.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, until we hear a name, until we see him play, I mean, who knows? They don't have a great track record. Are they going to do something? Yes. Is that something going to be good? Ooh, I don't know. We're going to have to find out. I hope it is. Both the front office and Lucci have watched these playoffs. I told you Lucci had a conversation with me about big time players rising to the occasion. They know. So how good they do in terms of getting somebody, that's what, that's why they're getting paid a lot of money, and hopefully they're going to earn that money. And if they don't, they might not be having that job in the long run.
All right, so I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Buzz. You said you had another position of need you wanted to talk about. Oh, 2.
I got 2, yeah.
So, and number 1 position of need on Buzz's list.
Yeah, after the 9 in the wing, the next one is a 6. Brian Acosta is not a pure lock down Carlos Grezzo 6. Now, he's done some good things there, but if you're talking about building a squad, he does get called up to things, and you might need another player. And as much as I'm on the front row of the Edwin Cerrillo bandwagon, he's not 100% ready to be a single 6 MLS stud yet. So I think they need a piece there, a piece vaguely like Victor Ulloa, except not him, one that tackles more and and covers more side to side, more like Grezzo-ish. You can't afford Grezzo, but something along those lines, because we're talking about now challenging at all positions and being able to use Acosta in more than one spot, so you're not locked into everything, right? It's always about not putting all your eggs in one basket. And then the other position, other than the 6, is center back depth, because right now Bresson is your center back backup at both positions. At the beginning of last season, you couldn't trust Callum Montgomery, but he's made a lot of progress and he's close. The spring will determine a lot whether he's ready to be your 4th guy or whether you need to loan him out. And then they let Moises Hernandez go, and the center backs that are coming up, Breck Evans is maybe not quite MLS ready yet. You want to see him tested at the championship perhaps, and then guys like Nico Correa or Justin Shea, who's a U17, those guys are 2 or 3 years away. So I think they'll make a move. Maybe it's through the draft, maybe it's through a college type homegrown signing. They do have the ability to do those. Your guys that used to be in the academy and maybe are doing great things in college. Something like that. Something like a Moises Hernandez, except not Moises Hernandez. A semi low 20s, but a guy who could maybe challenge Montgomery for that 4th spot in the rotation at center back. So those are my other 2, other than the 6 and the 9 and the wing is the center back backup.
Dan, you got any positions you'd like to see the team fill?
I think centre-back depth is a really great point, especially when we've seen Montgomery's passing's got a lot better over the season, but it's still not an amazing fit for Lucci Ball. As Buzz mentioned, the draft it's a great place to pick up a defender. Everyone's out there trying to find attacking talent, and the defenders often get neglected a little bit and fall down the order. So it'll definitely be quite interesting. And again, we're going to see, as we do with every time a new team comes in, a pretty busy trade period. We'll see how keen FC Dallas are if they want to get involved with that.
Okay, so are we feeling like we've covered this as much as you guys wanted to? Anything else in particular about the roster situation leading in for 2020? Buzz, you want to talk about?
Just that I think that a couple of the North Texas guys will get some looks. I think Francis Atuahene and Matua Masi are both coming back next week, which is the last week of training, to get in the mix a little bit. So there's some guys. This spring's going to be interesting. There's going to be 5 or 6 guys that might be getting tested to see, are you ready to help me, or do I need to send you to a championship instead of another season in North Texas? So that's going to be, for me, that's the fun. The fringe stuff is where I can really sink my teeth in and try and review guys and say what I think is going to happen. And, I think we covered just about everything else.
So earlier this week, you tweeted some information that you were hearing news that some of the young players were going to go over to Germany to train at Bayern Munich. Is this continuing to be a one-way street, or is there any sense that there's any possibility that for 2020 somebody comes back from Germany from their system and plays for Dallas?
Yeah, what I heard was that 3 players were going to go train, but then depending on who I talked to, among people that might know,
three Dallas players were going.
3 Dallas players were going to go over there, and then, like I said, depending on who I talked to, I got 6 different names of, oh yeah, that guy's for sure one of the 3. So I haven't gotten it locked down to where I'm comfortable to say who I think the 3 are, but you can probably take some educated guesses and feel pretty comfortable about who some of those might be. But no, I have not heard anything coming the other way. And as several people have reminded me, it's like this deal is a youth development deal. So like the payoff for Dallas, if you want to call it that, is things like taking the U15 team to the Bayern campus tournament and playing against all those amazing, great clubs that they played in that thing. It's the like these kids that are going to go, not all of them are going to be scouted by Bayern. like Thomas Roberts clearly was, and Chris Richards clearly was when they went. But then Brandon Cervania went. I think that one was more about just getting him some interesting training and interesting experience. And I kind of am left with the impression from people I've talked to that this situation is again going to be kind of like that, where maybe one player that's going is getting scouted, but the other two are like just going to go along and have a great experience and maybe get seen by some other sort of people, and more of your training stint than your tryout, if that makes sense. Is there much of a distinction there? I don't know. And unfortunately, I think you're right that I don't think this thing's ever going to translate into a player coming the other way. Unfortunately, and no one will say that, but that's what my gut is now telling me, that I don't think we're ever going to see a player come from Bayern.
It's weird to me because I just have to assume somewhere in the Bayern system there is a player who they'd like to get more regular playing time that's just not quite good enough to make it to the senior team, that could probably benefit from playing in a competitive league that's, I guess then the question is, well, is MLS better than whatever Bundesliga, reserve league that guy may be playing in? That's the part that really surprises me, is that not only is Dallas unable to convince them to do that they just don't seem interested in doing it, but maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. The one last question about this that I do want to ask you: at the beginning of the season, all of us were pretty much primed and ready for Thomas Roberts to pack his things up and move to Germany because Bayern Munich wanted him in a real bad way. We've all seemed to cool on that. And so my question is, A, were we just really wrong in our prediction? Or B, was Thomas's performances for North Texas, he was never bad, but he was either solid to very good, the kind of up and down of his performances, did that in any way damage their interest in bringing him over?
From the lay of the land that I got from asking around a little bit was that, the fact they brought him back meant that they were sort of tracking him, that he was on their list, and I think for example, if he's one of the people that goes again, I think that would be pretty indicative. What I have heard is that Thomas's position is a position, particularly with their U19 team, which is where Thomas would be right now, is pretty loaded at kind of what he does. And then the jump would be up to like their U23 team, which plays in like the Youth UEFA League or whatever. So I didn't get this from Thomas or anyone surrounding him. I just got it from people that are kind of attached to sort of agents and players, and they were sort of discussing why it hadn't happened. And the idea was that they're still tracking him and they still like him. They're just sort of happy to let him develop where he is because he was going to get all this first team training and this North Texas play. I don't think they're in a hurry to pull the trigger on him, but I do think there's still a level of interest. So we'll see. I mean, sometimes things just don't work out timing wise. You know what I mean? And occasionally, especially if you're coming from a place like Dallas and Arkansas to Bayern Munich, they might be like, we're going to wait half a season and see.
Right. Okay. Very good. The other thing real quick I wanted to ask about was Lucci did an interview. I can't remember if it was with John Arnold or who it was with. It may have been with Armin or somebody. And I was a little disappointed in Lucci's enthusiasm or willingness to kind of I took away from the article that Lucci seemed prepared for 2020 to be a season where essentially the goal is to essentially win the game in Seattle they lost this year. And if they did that, he'd be pretty happy with that.
That was the John Arnold article. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Dan thought about it, but I kind of felt like there was a little bit of like the idea of being patient. You know what I mean? Like part of our process is that 4 or 5 key players are 19 and 20. So like if we can take a step in those kids' progression, and if we can, be higher in the standings and host the game and win and advance and go deeper, then yes, that would be progress. So I'm with you. I'd like to see a little more ambition on that one. I don't. Dan, what do you think? Did you read that interview that John had?
Yeah, I mean, he was talking about putting themselves in a better position, which it's getting a home game. It's getting further up the table before the end of the season, and and knowing that you're not going on the road, that I mean, you may still not win, but you've got that advantage. You got home field. I mean, I'm not really sure where he can go from there. It was a season we kind of expected to get to the playoff-ish. I thought really the biggest disappointment was how the Open Cup went, because you losing to a lower division team. They're a really, really good lower division team, but still, I don't think they made that count and really got the reps for the younger players that they could have. But yeah, I mean, I'll take that over the goal next season's win MLS Cup at all costs, because that's not realistic, and that's just that'd just be him BSing, and that's we've all talked to Lucci enough to know that's not how he is. He's very understated. He talks about challenging. It can be playing against Cincinnati, and he'll say, we want to challenge to earn 3 points. He'll never. He doesn't want to guarantee a win. He just wants to guarantee a damn good go at it, and know in the back of his mind it better bloody well be a win.
The other news that came out this week was that Paxton Pomykal and Mr. Nelson both had surgery for core muscle injuries. Could somebody tell me what the hell that means?
Hernia.
Is that they're both
Sports hernia.
The core muscles are your adductors, so everything that comes off of like the groin, the hamstring, the quads, the lower stomach. So mostly it's hernias. It's talking about Paxton's hip flexor. It's talking about Nelson's hernia. It's talking about the adductor injury that Kellen had a few years ago. Anytime they talk about that particular doctor and that place in Philadelphia, that's the guy that fixes everyone in the world's groin. And my dog's back again.
I like to just pretend that you actually wear a little bell or a collar with a tag on it, and when you start talking, it jingles. That's in my head. That's what we're listening to. So don't remember.
That was part of the initiation for Third Degree. What are you talking about? Don't
right.
you have one?
I forgot. Yeah, well, many. It's been so long since I had to go through the initiation process. I forgot. That's right.
Yeah, 20 years, Peter.
It's been, Buzz. It's been a long time, buddy. Okay, yeah. Well, that's interesting. Because when they said when Paxton had surgery, I wondered if this was related to the now infamous inflamed hip flexor situation, or if this was a new injury that resulted from something else. So you're saying all that's tied together, and maybe that then goes back to Lucci's decision to not start him for the Seattle game or the games prior to that.
Yeah, they certainly buried the lead on that. I mean, for it to be bad enough to need surgery, that's not the impression I was left with. They were
was a
talking
lingering
about
issue. This is the kind of thing you clean up at this time of year and know that they're ready to get a few weeks in the gym before preseason.
Well, I would certainly say all of my particular outrage and confusion and whining and complaining and asking and demanding that Lucci be fired with shaking my fist in the air while I'm yelling on the radio would have completely had a different tone to it if somebody had just said, guys, he's hurt more than we're letting on. Like, I don't understand why they don't disclose this stuff or be more honest with the fan base and the media about this. I don't know what advantage they think they get out of being vague on this stuff, but I don't know.
Well, in hockey, they would say lower body injury.
Yeah, well, it's stupid in hockey.
That's what they did. That's what they put on the report when he first had that hip flexor. We only found out it was a hip flexor by talking to Lucci and him saying on record, it's not a hamstring or anything like that could be taken from lower body injury. It's a hip flexor. It's just a little inflamed.
Well, when Paxton called into the radio show, we were left with the impression he was ready to go and wanted to start. So maybe it's one of those things where they clean it up because they can and they got time to do it, and he's got time to rest. I don't know. I guess maybe we'll never.
You think as well, like these core injuries. That's affecting. That's the hamstring injury he had earlier in the year. That's favoring the leg and picking up the hip flex. You want to get him all season. So if you can tidy things up, and it's same as players having the little knee scopes and stuff at this time of year. It's just maintenance. just modern maintenance in the modern game, right?
Yeah, that kind of leads to a question I had just thought of. So, the team kind of ran into a plague of hamstring issues, and there was some questions about, this is a young coaching staff and a new support staff. Maybe they're kind of learning on the fly. It just dawned on me, Buzz, do you have any anticipation that Lucci's going to be making changes in the coaching staff and support staff for 2020?
No, I've not gotten any impressions on that, other than they have the one trainer or physical guy, I can't remember exactly what his title is, that got stuck in South America and couldn't get back, and they never could get his visa sorted out. They're using him as a scout instead.
And he was the guy that was supposed to be the expert in training for hamstring prevention.
Yeah, no,
right?
he had done really good. He'd done really good things with them. They really like him. He just couldn't get back in the country, and his name is escaping me right in the minute. As far as I know, he never got here. I haven't seen him. So, I mean, I think they'll still try and bring him back, and try and get him in. So that would be the only change that I'm aware of that would be coming, is if that dude can finally make it, and because he would be a nice piece. A lot of the young guys in the academy have told me, about that guy and how much he's helped even the young kids coming through the academy learn how to be pros and take care of themselves. So, and I apologize to him that I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and I don't have time to look it up, but that's the only staff change I see coming. The core stuff seems to happen, and this is something Oscar talked to me about like 3 years ago. You remember Jesus had a problem with this too. Oscar and his staff, which some of them are carried over now, they felt like that the current generation that's coming out of the academies, for some reason, these kids don't have the core muscle strength that, say, 5 to 10 years ago kids had. They don't know whether it's because they play more video games or something, or they don't go outside or something. But I'm telling you, like, the FC Dallas has been concerned about young kids coming out of the academy and core muscle for about 4 or 5 years now.
Interesting.
So it's definitely something they have marked as a trend among young guys, particularly like when they first get into the load where they're playing more games, like Paxton has this year. So, and Jesus had it when he first came up and went into MLS training instead of youth academy training. So, it's definitely a thing. Now, I'm not in the medical profession, so I can't cite a study for you or anything, but FC Dallas is definitely concerned about kids and core.
I know. I spoke to the Bazans when they were here, and obviously Fabian Bazan was the guru with that work to fix Mauro Diaz's hamstrings and everything else, and the way they worded it was kind of like a lot of it came down to just how the game's evolved, how it's got quicker, how there's more just flat out sprinting rather than how those runs are getting longer, and it's turned into more track athletes than just ball carrying soccer players, and and how those fast twitch fibers respond, and and just trying to maintain them, not even prepare them, just try and minimize the damage on the back end of it.
All right, so Buzz, any particular dates fans should be aware of that are upcoming as we roll into the official off-season?
Yeah, sure. The FC Dallas will train next week through November 8th. That'll be the end of their training for this calendar season. And then the next big, really important ones are the expansion draft, which FC Dallas is exempt from. And then they have these crazy waivers and re-entries, and none of which mean anything to FC Dallas unless you care about guys that contracts didn't get picked up. And then the most important one is that they got rid of the college combine, and they're going to have like a thing in conjunction with the College Cup, which is the 12th to the 15th of December. So the College Cup and the combine will happen together at the same time, same place. That's kind of cool. And then FC Dallas will report for physicals on January 18th. And the first day of training for spring 2020 is January 20th. Mark it in your calendar.
And the good news is that the awards and accolades continue to come in from the extremely successful debut season for North Texas Soccer Club. Both Eric Quill as Coach of the Year, and what was the player award that was done this week?
Arturo Rodriguez was named the Young Player of the Year, which is roughly under U23, basically. And the fun thing about that was he's well deserving of the award. Is that three of the top four vote getters were, and it's all voted on by USL One coaches and staff and stuff. Where three of the four were North Texas players. Or Renato Damos, and Ricardo Pepe was the fourth.
Now, MVP, which you've been pushing hard for Arturo, has not yet been announced, correct?
No, that's still to come. I wonder if him winning this means that people didn't vote for him for MVP. But when you look at his numbers, it's entirely possible he'll also be MVP because his numbers are just absolutely staggering in both offensive and defensive categories. So I still think he should be MVP.
All right. Now, I would have normally, per the run sheet, ended the podcast here. But while we were recording, some very interesting news has popped up on this thing called Twitter. And this may shake us to our very core. The Mainland, which is SB Nation's Orlando City outlet, their version of Big D Soccer, they are reporting that Orlando City, quote, is targeting former FC Dallas and current Club Tijuana manager Oscar Pereja to replace James O'Connor. Everybody just take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Sit down. Just let yourself absorb that news.
So I read that before we got on the call. Their entire article was based on he's worked with Tesho Akindele and Luis Muzzi, and Tijuana get rid of managers quite often. There was nothing. It just seemed like such a stretch.
Dan, don't poo-poo the article. That's fun.
Is it
well,
fun?
Luis Muzzi's the connection. I mean,
Yes.
that's obviously the real connection. And it is 100% true that Mexican managers turn over fast, and Oscar wanted a new challenge, and that's why he went to Mexico. He wanted the cauldron. So, I mean, if he does get canned, he's going to need a job, and Muzzi would be on him so fast. And a lot of times, if you're in a position like we are, and I can't speak for that site, but a lot of times we wouldn't write an article like that unless somebody behind the scenes to us was like, man, we're really hoping we can get him. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, but
I'm not saying that they
SB
didn't have much to
Nation
go on.
sites will.
Yeah,
Sure.
SB Nation sites, your mileage may vary on their terms of how much they follow a journalistic code. So I don't know. I didn't read the article. I just saw the tweet. So I didn't know. So you've read it, Dan, and you're just saying somebody just made this up out of whole cloth, or they actually they're not referring to any other reports or sources or anything.
It seems a little bit strange. There's no sources mentioned or anything. It's just a couple of loose links. It seems very strange because in Mexico they're getting to the Liguilla phase, and Cholos are in that. They're sitting 7th right now. I don't know. I mean, we knew Oscar wanted a new challenge. To then turn around and go to a team that has never made the playoffs, has no real youth in it. It just seems like a massive step backwards.
The only thing I would say about it is the article does lead with the Mainland has learned that. So they're professing to have some information here specifically. So, I cannot speak for the validity of that website, but it sure as heck is fun to conjecture. And boy, would that be a lot of drama and fun if he were to take that job. I'd have to call him and yell at him.
Well, it certainly would give everybody pause to really wonder, ask a lot of questions about what happened here, how was he allowed to leave, why did he leave? Because it would really paint his decision to pack up and leave to go take an opportunity in Mexico in a very different light if in the span of 12 months he decided to come back to Major League Soccer for what I think we would all agree is at least
the worst job.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, or is it, right? I don't know. I don't know what the ownership situation is in Orlando. I mean, obviously those guys have poured a lot of money into building an amazing facility. But to Dan's point, they don't have the youth structure. But considering how little Lucci used all of his youth product here in Dallas compared to Lucci, it does make you wonder if over the years Pereira came to the opinion that, look, I'm never winning an MLS Cup with kids kids. I need legitimate veteran talent to power this thing to make them legitimate competitors. And again, I say this all the time. That's the reason why his eyeballs got distracted and he left in the first place, because he just knew he was never going to get that here. Maybe if there's any truth to this, maybe somebody, Moosey's calling him and going, look, they're ready to spend some money and get you some players. Would you like to come here and play in this amazing stadium in this awful humidity?
Well, certainly whether they have to buy him out or whether he's fired makes a significant difference of how we would answer that question. And you also have to wonder, with Orlando now going to be in Miami's shadow down there in Florida.
Oh yeah.
Are they going to be like, oh, we got to get to work, especially because the Inter Academy is killing it already. And Moosey went down the express statement of they were going to build the academy. So, and Oscar built the academy here. So you could totally see the appeal. And if the guy's out of a job, he's out of a job, and then it makes perfect sense. But if he takes a buyout to leave, boy, that'll be, then we'll have to really ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he also walks away from a playoff team, he's nuts to go to someone that's never made the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know what my sense is that Oscar is having a rather good go of it for his first year. Again, we all agree Zolos is a team that I think is fired or its coaches left every year for the last 7 or 8 seasons or something like that. I can't even remember what the longest tenure of one particular coach has been over the last since that club's been around. It's not long. That was also why we were all shocked he took the job in the first place, because it was such it wasn't a function of if you get fired, but when you get fired.
Well, I mean, his start there was rough as well. It looked like he was going to get fired.
Super quick, yeah.
Yeah, I talked to him right after he won that cup game against, it was like Chivas or Club America, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody big. They knocked off in the cup semi, I can't remember what it was. And at that point, he was feeling really good and relishing the challenge and enjoying himself. So, but admittedly, that was, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. So I haven't talked to him lately, so I'm about to call him now.
Yeah, I was supposed to meet up with him when he was in town several months ago, and it ended up not working out. And unfortunately, that would have been, well, now, like you, Buzz, I got to get on the horn with him and do another interview, because I got to know what is up with that. If that turned out to be true, him walking in with another team that is in this league would be really weird. Very ex-wife, new boyfriend kind of thing, right?
Yeah, for sure. If he were to bail this quickly, that's the thing, is if he takes a buyout and bails this fast, that means something's gone south down there, or that means that will really raise questions about why he left here in the first place.
All right. Okay, so Dan, anything else you want to talk about, buddy?
Just how wonderful the new look Third Degree is, and how we're all going to enjoy it, and how great it is that now our content is so much more accessible, and people can just come to us and stay in that one place for all their news and views.
All right. Is there any chance I can get an impersonation from you? Since I don't know, this may be the last podcast we do for a few weeks, and I think everybody would love one last impersonation from you. I can even throw a name out if you'd like one.
You've obviously got one in mind.
No, I was just kind of, yeah. Do you have one you'd like to do? How about I'll leave it up to you? Is there one in particular you'd like to do?
I mean, we did kick off the show with one. So.
Yeah, but it was so good, and you have this amazing... I mean, it is called Dan Crook's Amazing Library of Impersonations, so it's not like you've only got one or two. You can rip them off. You could do them.
That T-shirt is coming to the Third Degree, whatever the T-shirt company store is.
I mean, your Andrezic impersonation I heard you do one time is pretty awesome.
I don't think I've ever done one. It's generic Eastern European.
Buzz and I, we stood over in the locker room and listened to you do it, and we laughed and laughed. It was the one you did right after you did the John Arnold impersonation.
So the least believable part was when you said you were in the locker room for it.
That's a good point. Fair. That's a good shot, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, shout out. Post-game shenanigans.
But you sound like a kind of Eastern European guy. Like I give good fight.
That's actually pretty close.
That's pretty damn good. All right.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That's just what he sounds like.
All right. Well, it's been a fun season of Third Degree, the podcast. Buzz and Dan, thank you both for your concerted efforts in this weekly venture.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Peter, for making us sound semi-professional.
Well,
Fully professional.
Sorry, minor league.
yeah. This is very much USL 1 podcasting here. Maybe someday we'll do
NBSL.
Yeah, we'll go to USL Pro next, right?
Yeah. Move up to the championship.
We'll shoot for something the next level up. Okay, and of course, again, the big news, Buzz Carrick's thirddegree.net becomes its own independent site as of Friday, November 1st. Please go over there. Consider donating to his Patreon, helping Buzz hit his goals, and helping that dude out because he totally deserves it. Especially if you're going out of your way to listen to this podcast, you're exactly the kind of person that I think should take at least a moment to consider donating to his Patreon.
You can listen to the podcast within the new thirddegree.net.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. So you don't even need like a podcast app. You can do it.
No,
you can stream it from the website.
The latest episode will pop up in the window.
Nice. All right. Well, so much to look forward to in this off season.
Yes.
All right. Somebody had a baby. All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Big party at Dan's house.
All right. Trick or treat, everybody. Happy
Trick or treat.
Halloween to you both. Thank you. Very good, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you sometime in the near future on another new season of Third Degree, the podcast.
Post time.